I have to remember that I did only start, I was a public engagement assistant part-time in November 2019. So in 3 years, I've gone from there to kind of public engagement manager for a whole college. And that is something I have to be really proud of.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. This week's guest is Faye Watson, a rising star of the public engagement world. Despite being only 3 years into her career, Faye is already managing public engagement across a large chunk of the University of Edinburgh and has just been elected chair of ScotPen, the Scottish Public Engagement Network. As you'll hear, her career didn't have the most conventional start. She dropped out of a PhD and then scored her first job all the way from interview to job offer over the course of a train journey from Cardiff to Glasgow. Keep listening, it's a good story. From our chat, it's pretty clear that Faye has a talent for building relationships and connecting people, as well as an infectious energy and enthusiasm for her work and a burning desire to make things better. Listen on to see if she'll convert you to Team Faye as well. So welcome along, Faye. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
And so I wonder, first of all, you could just tell us about what it is that you do and how you got into doing that kind of work.
Yeah, so I'm Faye. I'm the Public Engagement with Research Manager at the College of Medical and Veterinary Medicine at the University of Edinburgh. I only started on the 1st of October this year, so very new to the job. And prior to that, I was at the MRC University of Glasgow Centre for Virus Research, and I was with them for a couple of years. I'm actually quite relatively new to the sector in terms of time spent. So I kind of quit my PhD in 2019, I think, September 2019, and then I joined the Wellcome Centre for Human Neuroimaging at UCL shortly after that. So kind of as a public engagement assistant. So very kind of quickly found my way in the sector and kind of had a short contract with them. And then I actually, my contract was coming to an end in it was meant to be March 2020. So I actually sold my house and booked a ticket to go travelling. And that didn't happen. So I was really lucky that Cassie, my boss there, kept me on. And then I found my job up in Glasgow. As you can imagine, the Centre for Virus Research was needing a bit of help in terms of communications and engagement. So really lucky to find my job and made the move to Scotland.
Brilliant. So what sorts of things are you doing? I know obviously you said you're quite new in your current job, but what sorts of things are you doing or what sorts of things are you hoping to do in that job?
Yeah. So this job is quite different to my last one because I'm kind of sitting at college level and I don't necessarily have a team who I line manage, but I have about 20 plus public engagement and communications professionals across the college who I'm there to support. So I'll be doing a lot of things around centralising a lot of the things that they do out in their kind of silos. So there's a lot of incredible training going on and evaluation and things like that. But it takes a lot of their time to do that in all of the different centres that we have. So it's all about trying to work out what we already have and how we can kind of centralise that to reduce the workload for everyone, but also get to share the incredible pockets of expertise that we have across the college. I think one of my biggest things is going to be working out the new funding landscape with Wellcome kind of going off the boil and UKRI with their new public engagement strategy. It's trying to work out what seed funding and what funding opportunities we're going to have for public engagement. Is that going to be integrated into research funding? So it's sort of weathering the storm on that and then trying to support ways of kind of at a college level having that sort of influence on that and making the best of the opportunities that we have to then feed that down to all of the different institutes and centres that we have. We also have an incredible group of what we call our academic leads for public engagement. So these sit within each of the different institutes and they are someone who has done a lot of incredible work in engagement as an academic and they kind of lead the way and act as role models. So I'll be working with them to kind of develop them professionally in their public engagement, but also supporting them to kind of be those role models for all of the other academics within the centres and institutes. Yeah, that's a small synopsis of what I'm doing.
Sounds like a lot of relationship management and making sure the right people are talking to each other and getting the support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Fiona Murray, the kind of public engagement coordinator within Edinburgh, said to me that I needed to deal with Edinburgh like it's 40 different universities. And that's definitely the kind of idea that I've got since moving there, is that there's a lot of phenomenal work going on in all of the different centres and institutes, but it's kind of getting them all to talk and getting them to share and reduce workload by just kind of sharing expertise and reaching out to others.
Oh, sounds like you've got some big challenges in that job. And what other sorts of challenges have you faced more generally in your career?
In my short 3-year career in public engagement, I think the biggest thing, and there's a lot of precarity in what we do, and you can't really move up without moving out, which is one of the problems, especially working within higher education. We have really rigid HR systems and things like that. And public engagement professionals fall between that gap between research and professional services. So it is really, really difficult for us to kind of get the recognition and reward that we need. And that also, it comes from having fixed term contracts and all of us being, we've kind of left academia, most of us, to have a better life and see the grass is greener on the other side. But actually, we're still at the mercy of all of the same issues that most academics face. I lived in Cardiff, but I had to go to London for my first job. And then my second job was up in Glasgow. And luckily, I managed to find my third job in Edinburgh. But still, I couldn't find, there was no way for me to kind of move up within Glasgow. So that's something that kind of is being a big challenge. And I think another thing is the level of expectation that is on us as individuals versus the capacity and resource that we have. Like my program at the Centre for Virus Research, I had 220 people that I was there to support, and I had $5,000 a year to do that. And just me. And luckily, we had the COVID funding and things like that. So I was able to employ short term my incredible public communications and engagement officer, Lois Mason, who has now stepped up kind of and is acting in my old role, and she's doing a phenomenal job. But without us having all that funding and support through COVID, there was just none there for me to grow a team. So I had to spend a lot of time writing big grants to get people in, which meant I couldn't do anything, of the doing. And that's the same, I think, but there's kind of a big funnel at the top of public engagement that is the biggest challenge of people fall out before they can, really kind of get to those top level jobs and things because of all of the other pressures.
Yeah, I think I've heard that a lot from lots of different people, similar things. And I guess one challenge that I wonder about in your career journey, as you say, a lot of people who do this kind of work have chosen to move from research into doing this kind of thing. You say you didn't finish your PhD, but decided to make that shift. Is there a story there that you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, of course. I'm really open about it because I think it's something that really needs to be talked about. And kind of the long and short of it is I fell out of academia and fell out of my PhD because of the research culture that was where I was. And I went into my PhD not really ever wanting to do a PhD, but I just didn't really know the next steps. And I had a supervisor who kind of really believed in me and was like, I really want you to do this project. And I knew how lucky I was to be kind of essentially able to walk into a PhD. But I always knew that that life was not for me. And I really, really tried. And my first rotation was phenomenal. And actually, I was working with my second supervisor. The project was incredible. But unfortunately, my first supervisor had a really difficult situation prior in his career where he'd been scooped by his own lab.
Oh.
So there was I was the only person in the lab, and I was doing all the work and everything kind of relied on me. And yeah, it was just difficult in that silo. I was, one person. I couldn't really talk to anyone. And as you can probably guess, I love talking to people and engaging. That's why I'm in the job I'm in now. And so he let me, he was really kind. He really understood kind of that my passions lied within that side of things. And so I started doing some volunteering within the university. I set up a University of the Third Age science group. So this is people over 60 who are retired and want to kind of continue their learning. And I set up a science group, and every session we had one early career researcher and one kind of late career researcher giving a talk. We also let the kind of master's students try their poster presentations out with this group and stuff. And so I set that up, and I just realized that that's what I loved. So I lasted a couple of years. I went on my placement in industry. So I was really lucky to be part of a doctoral training partnership for the BBSRC who let you do those industry placements. So I went to the National Botanic Garden of Wales, and I worked with one of their phenomenal government funded projects, which was all about exploring nature and for your well-being. So did a lot of courses on gardening for well-being, and they gave me the opportunity to run basically a festival over the bank holiday weekend, which was all about exploring that. And that was just me clicking into, right, this is my jam.
Yeah.
And I put on 3-day event over the weekend, which was one of the best attended events they'd ever had. Brilliant. And I just and I was valued. And that difference between, everyone being, being really sad I was leaving and things like that. And I was like, I went back to my PhD and I was like, this is not for me. I'm doing a disservice to kind of my supervisor and all of that when, he wants someone who just wants to do that project. Yeah. And I was like, that's not me. And also I'm doing a disservice to myself. And I started getting anxiety, and that's not something I'd ever really experienced before. Mm-hmm. And so I had, a couple of weeks off because I just basically couldn't function. And I, between that placement and coming back to my PhD, I went on holiday to Bali, and I spent the whole 2 weeks anxious about coming back to my PhD. Oh. And I just thought, this is ridiculous, and it's coming from a family where my mum was an academic without a PhD. She fell out of she kind of hit that glass ceiling, and so she was really encouraging me to stay, and she didn't want me to have those barriers. But I think at the end of the day, we all just sat down and were just like, this is just not for me. So I quit and went completely cold turkey without any other opportunity. But I was really lucky to have the support, and I know not a lot of people are privileged enough to have that support. But within 6 weeks, I had my job at the Wellcome Centre for Human Neuroimaging, which is a whole story in itself, because I got that job and was interviewed on a train to Glasgow.
With somebody sitting next to you or on the phone?
Yeah, so I'd literally just been in a mental health first aid course, because in that 6 weeks I did loads of courses, and I was trying to kind of make my CV as pretty as it could be. And so that 2-day course was one of the most phenomenal and draining things I'd ever done. And I hadn't been looking at my emails and all of this. And Joe Brody's wonderful PsyCom mailing list was something I was keeping an eye on. And so I was coming up to Glasgow because my partner at the time, family were up here, and in between Cardiff and where he worked, which was a 20 minutes thing, I'd had a look at what jobs had come up. I saw this one at UCL. I sent my CV. I was like, why not? And then about 5 minutes before the train got in there, I got an email saying, right, can you talk in 10 minutes?
Oh, goodness.
And I was like, well, I might as well. So then, my partner at the time got on, and he was like, what's going on? I was like, I'm about to have an interview. And I'm sat at commuter time at about 5:30 on a Friday.
Oh, goodness.
Transport for Wales train.
Yeah.
And Cassie rang me, and I had to give a full 20-minute interview off the car on the train with everyone around me knowing what was going on. So I got off the phone, and we got to Crewe. And just as we were coming into Crewe, she rang me back and offered me the job.
Oh.
And it was funny because there were people who were sat sort of opposite me who knew what was going on. Got the phone call, and I was like, I'd love to accept. Everyone was like,
I was going to say, cheer on the train.
So that was really, really bizarre.
Oh, what a great story, though. Yeah,
and that was my start in public engagement.
Yeah. Oh, well. So, I mean, thinking then about your journey in public engagement, obviously that was, you started on a bit of a high there, a good story. What other things have you done that you're really proud of?
Yeah, as we were saying earlier, this is the thing that we aren't good at.
Yeah.
It's saying, because we always want to recognise the people and the projects and things that have kind of led us to this. But I think if I look back and kind of where I am now and the kind of level of influence I'm having in this role and the trust that people really senior in the sector are putting on me in this role, is that I have to remember that I did only start. I was a public engagement assistant part-time in November 2019. So in 3 years, I've gone from there to kind of public engagement manager for a whole college. And that is something I have to be really proud of. But it's difficult for me not to say but. But I do have to, and I do have to reflect, though, that I am really lucky in the sense that I was in that position where I didn't have a job, didn't have a house, and I was able to move and pick up the jobs kind of where they came up and just be able to throw myself into that. And I know a lot of incredible people in the sector just aren't able to do that with, family and things now and how difficult things are at the moment. So, there is a kind of an element of being able to do that as well. So anyone who kind of hasn't had that career trajectory in 3 years, it doesn't mean that they aren't phenomenal people and won't get there. It's just everyone's on their own timeline. And I think having kind of gone into the Welcome Centre as a public engagement assistant and then getting my public engagement coordinator job at Glasgow, and the Centre for Virus Research basically choosing a complete wild card. I was really proud of that. And then the program kind of that I built and what I kind of did at there was something I am really proud of. And again, I was able to put kind of my enthusiasm and, none of us were leaving the house. We were all in lockdown. So I was able to just sit and completely focus. And I'm really proud of, being able to do kind of what we did and bringing everything into that. So I brought interns in, which meant that the interns could focus on, so these are other PIPs, so the placement in industry students, so PhD students. So that was really nice because I had a really good opportunity when I did mine. So I wanted to really play that forward. So I had kind of 4 or 5 of them, and 2 of them wrote their own seed funds and got funding and things. But that gave me the time to then really put my kind of head down and bring in Lois and have her to be able to do all of our comms. And she's, I left to it, all of the comms was all her. And then build up the team and have the TIC project, which is another thing I'm really proud of, and bring kind of Sam Langford into that as a project manager. So just building the CVR had a history of doing incredible outreach and things before, but it was a very different beast. The person who was in the job 18 months before me was in the job 2 or 3 days a week. It was a very much a kind of science festivals and events sort of thing. And then with this job, they were like, we want it all.
Yeah.
And obviously, kind of being during COVID, it was like, well, they were the hot commodity. So it was a really exciting, it was probably the best and worst decision I've ever made in terms of my career. but it was, I'm really proud of everything that we kind of built there, and the work they're all going to go on and do now is great. And luckily, being at Edinburgh, I can still work with a lot of them because we have a lot of virologists over in Edinburgh as well.
Yeah.
So
it must have been an extraordinary time to be somewhere that's doing virus research during COVID.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like the first few weeks, my first job, the first week was writing those nominations for the OBEs. So writing about people you didn't know about, but I was able to look at all of the stuff that have been put together. I was like, I am joining a pretty incredible place, and it was very, very, very fast paced, which is what I love. But also we were in lockdown as well, so I didn't have everything else going on, so I could really just focus on work. And one of the things that I really tried to make sure is that I was doing a lot of communications around COVID. But what I wanted to make sure is that all of the other viruses and the people that are affected by all of the other viruses that were still there and even flaring up, like, for example, Ebola, the people with Ebola, weren't being monitored as well because of COVID. And then that re-flared up again. And there was all of these people that had almost been forgotten. And that's where my efforts on engagement projects really right. So that's how the TIC project came up, because this is, TICs, because everyone was out and about in the countryside, the climate is changing in Scotland, so the TICs were out in their forces and people were also exploring the outdoors more. So in Scotland, we really needed to think about tick-borne diseases, and that's kind of how that came about. And then HIV, all of the people who have lived with HIV were all being like, oh great, well here's another pandemic that's going to go and get sorted whilst we're still sat here experiencing the same problems we experienced in the 80s.
Yeah.
So that's where the Unseen Hands project came about. And that was all about involving people with HIV and hepatitis C in the research that we're doing and making sure that those programs don't stop.
Yeah.
And that's, gone through to having Public Health Scotland in one of our events in September. So, that was a difficult thing to sort of convince work. When we were all COVID, we need to do everything with COVID, and also have the capacity to do because of all of the crisis communications we were doing. But luckily we had some, the researchers were really wanted to do it. And I think because a lot of the work might not have been in the lab as much because they weren't able to pivot onto COVID and things, they did have that opportunity for a bit more time there. And
Is there any information about these projects in the public domain? Could we send people? If you've got links, if you could send me them, we'll put them in the show notes. That'd be great.
So one of the things I did before I left was Lois and I designed a whole new website just for the engagement work.
Brilliant.
And so that's www.cvr-engagement.co.uk, and I'll send that to you.
Great. Oh well, we should pop that in the links. Yeah.
Public facing. So that project, that website is all about all of the kind of public and patient facing things that we do. we did at the CVR, and also all of the resources and things as well. Because, like, for example, Ed Hutchinson, one of our principal investigators, every year makes virus snowflakes that you can cut out. And they are so, and I don't want to know how much time he spends working out all the symmetry of these things, but they're phenomenal. And there's loads of stuff like that. Board games, build a virus, or that. So I probably need to stop talking about the CVR because I have left.
You're allowed to be proud of it. That's okay.
I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And you, as you've said, you're very new in your current job, so I'm sure in a year's time you'll be talking as enthusiastically about your current job. Yeah. So already you've achieved so much in such a short time. It already seems like you've got a magic wand. But if you had a magic wand for real and an unlimited budget, what would you do in this sector?
So kind of as we were talking before, like in the challenges, like there's a lot of precarity in the sector. Like there's no security for anyone in the sector unless, even me now, I'm on a 12-month contract. I've left the centre where they were going through their renewal period, and I would have had a secure job for 5 or 7 years. And I've left that to go for this job because this is the next career step for me, but it's only a 12-month contract. And I might, at the end of this, I might be made permanent, but I had to gamble and take the job, and I might not be. So who knows? If anyone's looking for a public engagement for October next year. So things like that. And I think that's just constantly keeps people anxious. Yeah. So I think the most important thing, and this is the same with other, research adjacent jobs like technicians and all of that, it's all short-term contracts. So I think I would put money into making everyone's jobs permanent. I think everyone is in those roles because they are good and because they are valued. Yeah. So why not just put a no end date on that? And people shouldn't be having to work 2 or 3 jobs across 2 or 3 different universities to be able to, at the moment, to pay for the cost of living. We should be valued by the places, they employed us for a reason, right? So why are they not keeping us?
Yeah.
That's kind of my main one. That's my biggest bugbear. And also this is really true for anyone from a marginalized background or any sort, it has any sort of protected characteristic. This is just so much harder for all of them. So, they're not going to come into the sector if we've got all this precarity, because these people have been brought up on precarity, so they need, a structure and security. And I think if we can do that for the sector, then we are going to have more people from communities, more people from, the people who we are engaging with actually wanting to come and work with us.
Yeah.
So permanent contracts. You need to develop a career track for public engagement as well, because I think every public engagement person at every university in the UK is sick of regrading and it not being possible, because we fall down that crack between research and professional services. And professional services, it's the job that is graded. It's not the person. Whereas in research, it's the person. So we can go off and get, like I did, £170,000 worth of funding, and it means nothing because my job did not dictate that I had to do that.
Yeah.
And that's, as I said, like we need to move up. We have to move out to move up. And again, security. So it's kind of money into HR processes to create a whole new career track for kind of research, even just research adjacent.
Yeah.
And luckily some unis do have that technical services development. So it's kind of like, well, if there's that, we can think about this more broadly. Funding mechanisms to give communities the power. I think that's a thing that's always held by like higher education, and we have really rigid processes, historic processes, and this is being done by the Ideas Fund and the Lottery Fund and things like this. So it's UKRI and Wellcome and all of the big power holders giving that power to communities, and trusting. It's all about trust, but there needs to be money to go into proving that and things. I think there should be a budget to have a creative on every project. I think even the most fundamental science projects need a creative to come in and give you a whole different dynamic. I regularly just invite creatives into the initial conversations that I have with researchers, because even I can be linear sometimes in my thinking, because I am in an academic environment. So just having someone to completely spin that on every project, that has to be that's mandatory. 10 grand and you need an artist.
Nice. I like it.
Someone. And then I think a lot of public engagement is done by people who hold big grants. So these are people, senior people with a lot of people in their teams with a lot of budget, and there's not enough seed funding for the early career researchers who doing the engagement actually will will allow them to get fellowships and allow them to this, because at the moment there's again that bottleneck of all these phenomenal early career researchers who all have to prove the same things. But what's going to make them the future leader fellow in the future? But there's no, unless you are an ECR in a lab with loads of funding, you're never going to be able to do any of that. So it's making, the kind of large seed funding and, within smaller kind of ECR grants, having X amount for public engagement and letting them explore something. That's probably
I'll sign up for that. That sounds like a good future. Yeah, brilliant.
And free coffee and free coffee machines.
Even better.
My conversations and projects when I was working at UCL were just from meeting people around the coffee machine.
Yeah.
So free coffee for all.
Faye for president. Yes, I like it. So just to start wrapping up our conversation, I just want to give you an opportunity. You've mentioned a few of the people that you've worked with who've been great colleagues. Is there anybody else you'd like to give a little bit of love to?
Yeah, I love everyone. This is the problem. But I think the people who I've been working with the last year and stuff, there's a few people who are phenomenal but might not necessarily get a kind of shout out. I mean, my first shout out will just have to be Cassie Hugo. UCL. So this is my first boss in public engagement, an incredible mentor, and the stuff that she does so she's the public engagement manager and also the lead for EDI at the Department of Imaging Neuroscience at UCL, and she's won awards for her EDI work and stuff the last year. But she has developed whole programs which open up science to people from marginalized background, and she has developed a whole program so when you get people into science and to do a STEM at undergrad, then they don't know, they fall out because there isn't that support at undergrad for these people either. So none of them really make it through to PhDs and things like that. So she's developed a whole program of how do we keep people in science called Into Research, and it's phenomenal. And this woman is an absolute powerhouse. I mean, I'm proud of my £170,000 worth of funding. She's got nearly a million in terms of funding, plus all of the sponsorship and all of that. This woman is an absolute powerhouse and one of my biggest role models. So I wanted to shout out to her. I did the Engage Academy last year, and my working group were amazing. And we now stay in touch and we have coffees every month. And it's mainly for us to just sit and moan, but it's great to hear their work. So Mike Norman at the Babraham Institute, he's now their kind of public engagement manager, and he's really moving their thinking beyond outreach to what else we can do. And he has a lot of issues with the BBSRC just being very floaty about what they do with public engagement. So he's really trying to forge a path there, and it's phenomenal work. And there's been loads of changes in staffing and all sorts of things. And, he's still smiling and still going, and just, again, like a wonderful person. And then the other person in that group is Liz Danner at Imperial. And Liz is absolutely revolutionizing how we teach public engagement to students, and is creating whole courses and ways to make sure that public engagement and science communication and things like that are embedded within our teaching as STEM subjects, instead of, getting to a PhD and being like, oh, this is something you can do. It's like, no, this is a whole career path. This is something that you can do. And she's done phenomenal work and, is exploring going down the lecturing pathway now and things. So, big shout out to Liz. And two more. So, person who I think is absolutely phenomenal, considering she only works 3 days a week. And I read through their kind of MRC submission of what they did for public engagement, and it's phenomenal, is Dee Davison at Edinburgh. So she's at the Institute of Genetics and Cancer, and Dee is really, again, one of those people that's moved the thinking from outreach. And, she does incredible things with Science Insights, which is where students can come and have an insight into science across the University of Edinburgh and other things. But Dee is really moving things towards patient and public involvement and making sure all of their researchers, she's got big grand plans for the Institute where, anyone who is working on anything where there is an end user, they are involved in the development of the research, and their plans for the next kind of iteration of their funding is amazing. And she's just a phenomenal person. And I'm really excited to be working with her at Edinburgh. And then my last shout out is to Kirsty Ross, who is one of those people who works across multiple different unis and different jobs. And I think she's St Andrews and Strathclyde at the moment. But Kirsty makes sure that STEM is accessible to everyone, especially those with additional needs, and she is very passionate about doing that. And I've watched Kirsty at I met her finally in person at the Glasgow Science Festival this year, and I went and had a go at their stall, and I was absolutely enthralled by everything that was going on. And I think Kirsty's just passion for making sure that science is accessible to all is really, really commendable. And yeah, so that's my last shout out. But I love everyone, and my team at the CVR, so Sam Langford and Sten Lewis, all my interns. I can't, yeah, and there's so many people. I wish I could shout out to everyone, but I tried to get it just into 5.
Yeah.
So that I wouldn't just drawl on forever.
They sound like, if the others are anything like those 5, I think it would be a very impressive list. But yeah, it's a bit like the Oscars. We'll get a point where you'll be kind of dragged off stage. Thank you so much for coming to chat, Faye. It's been lovely. If people want to track you down, where's the best place for people to find you?
Oh, I have a very rubbish Twitter. That's where I kind of lurk. I think that's Faye Watson 94.
Okay, great. Again, we'll get the link.
Thanks. I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well. I share a lot of kind of our project successes and things on LinkedIn. I'm sad that I'm not engaged in person this year, hopefully next year, but I am actually part of a conference called Next Steps, which is all about next steps in public engagement. And this is how we build the sector better together. And it's mainly around, how do we get people into the sector who aren't already there? How do we keep them there? How do we build a better sector together? And we've got a session that we're running at Engage next week. And then at the beginning of February, my session is being run with the wonderful Naomi from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Charlotte Thorley, who many of you will probably know of in the public engagement sector. We're running a session all about how we keep people in the sector and how do we work at different levels to support, mentor, sponsor, use our privilege to support others, to really think about how we can build a stronger sector.
Brilliant.
Where I live.
Fantastic. Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely talking to you.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. You can find show notes and other episodes at researchadjacent.com. I would absolutely love to hear what you think of the show, so please get in touch. You can drop us a message via researchadjacent.com or find us on social media at resadjacent. And if you've enjoyed the show, please think about sharing it, subscribing, or leaving a review so that other people can find us too. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.